No one in that prison had a clue that the most dangerous man of all was sitting right there, quiet, eating slowly, taking every humiliation without saying a word. Still, motionless, as if all the chaos and violence around him were nothing more than background noise, until that silence started to feel heavy and that weight became a threat. The cafeteria at Santa Rosalia Federal Penitentiary, a maximum security prison in northern Mexico, rang with the clatter of steel trays and the scrape of metal benches. The air smelled like sweat, bleach, and cold food. The rules were simple. Eat fast, keep your head down, survive another day. But there were always those who fed on fear. The worst of them all was Ramiro El Toro Garcia, a walking tank made of muscle and tattoos. Garcia owned that place. Every scar on his body told a story of knives, fists, and fights that always ended the same way, with someone bleeding on the floor. When he walked by, the chatter died. No one looked him in the eye. Fear followed him like a shadow. But that day, something broke the routine. Sitting alone at the last table was the new guy, Miguel Cardenas, mid-30s, calm eyes, steady hands, posture too disciplined for someone fresh in hell. Ramiro smirked. "Well, look who we got here. The Zen rookie," he sneered. He grabbed a bowl of cold rice and dumped it right over Miguel's head. The food slid down slowly, sticking to his short hair. Some inmates laughed. Others froze. "Welcome to hell, princess," Ramiro taunted. "Around here, I'm the one in charge." Miguel didn't say a word. He just kept chewing, slow and calm, like nothing had happened. No anger, no fear, just silence. That silence hit harder than any punch. Even Ramiro looked thrown off for a second. "Hey, I'm talking to you," he yelled, shoving Miguel's tray, spilling food everywhere. Miguel finally lifted his gaze. Cold eyes. Empty. The kind you only see in people who've already looked death in the face. For a split second, Ramiro froze. He didn't know why, but something in that stare cut straight through him like a blade. "You talk too much," Miguel said quietly. The whole cafeteria went dead silent. No one moved. And for the first time ever, the king of Santa Rosalia had nothing to say. Ramiro shoved him again, harder this time, trying to remind everyone who ruled that place. But the new guy didn't budge, didn't even flinch. He stood there like solid rock. The guards watched from a distance, ready to jump in, but something in the air made them hesitate. Silence returned, heavy, unbreakable, and everyone could feel it. Something was about to change. That night, as the sound of cell doors echoed through the corridors, Ramiro was still laughing with his crew, bragging about the rice joke. But Miguel Cardenas didn't sleep. He lay there in the dark, eyes open, hands still on his chest, waiting. He memorized every sound, the keys, the footsteps, the guard rotations. By morning, the air in the prison had shifted. No one could explain it, but the cafeteria felt different, tenser. Miguel ate alone, like always, but this time no one dared to mess with him. They didn't know it yet, but that quiet new inmate wasn't some ex-agent or regular con. He was a ghost, a silent assassin known in the underworld for killing without sound, without trace, without mercy. Ramiro Garcia had just picked a fight with a phantom, and soon enough, he'd be on his knees, begging for forgiveness. Santa Rosalia wasn't just a prison. It was an abyss built from concrete and despair. Buried deep in the Sonoran desert, surrounded by steel walls and towers that cut through the sky, it was where the government sent men the world had given up trying to understand. Time didn't pass there. It dragged, chained to every soul trapped inside. The air reeked of rust, sweat, and old pain. The slamming of the gates sounded like the iron heartbeat of the place, constant, merciless. Guards and inmates shared the same dead eyes. The only difference was that some held keys and others wore cuffs. Ramiro Garcia ruled that hell like a beast crowned by fear. He was all muscle and scars, but the real power was in his stare. Cold, ruthless. He came from a gang in Ciudad Juarez, known for tearing rivals apart barehanded. Every newcomer learned quick. In Santa Rosalia, there were no rules, no law, no mercy. Only Ramiro, until Miguel Cardenas arrived. A name no one knew. Yet every time it was whispered, the air felt heavier. Miguel didn't talk much, slept even less, but he noticed everything. He didn't look at people, he studied them. Patterns, habits, weaknesses. The others thought he was just another guy trying to survive, but there was something in his calm that made even the toughest men uneasy. He moved with precision, like a man who'd been trained to control every inch of his body. His file said, double homicide, no more details, no family, no address, no past, just a number and a sentence. Then came the rumors. They say he was a contract killer, made people disappear. Yeah, sure, everyone here's got a story. Maybe, but he never denies it. His silence turned into legend. While others shouted, fought, or traded favors, Miguel just watched. He never reacted to insults, never asked for anything, and that unnerving calm started to chip away at the fear that kept Ramiro in power. Even the guards noticed. Sergeant Ramirez once muttered, "That guy's different." When he walks by, it's like the air shifts. Miguel seemed to know exactly when the cameras blinked, when shifts changed, when the spotlights turned away. It was like he'd memorized the entire blueprint of the prison. Every hallway, every guard, every shadow. The cafeteria became the stage of tension. No one sat near Ramiro's crew anymore, but no one got close to Miguel either. An invisible line ran through that room now. Everyone knew it wouldn't hold for long. During yard time, Miguel walked slow, eyes on the watchtowers. Sometimes he just stood still, staring into the desert. People thought he was trying to adapt. He wasn't. He was waiting. Ramiro could feel the throne slipping, and nothing burned him more than being ignored. Every day, Miguel's silence ate at him like acid. One of his thugs, Esteban Cruz, tried to warn him. "Forget that guy, Ramiro. He ain't normal." "Normal or not," Ramiro growled. "Nobody looks at me like that and walks away." Santa Rosalia was a ticking bomb, and at its center, two men, total opposites, the beast who ruled by fear, and the killer who never had to raise his voice. Down the corridor, a single drip echoed, tick-tock, counting down to the inevitable. Something was coming, and when it did, Santa Rosalia would never be the same again. The Santa Rosalia Federal Penitentiary felt like a living thing, built of steel, concrete, and despair. Every hallway breathed tension, every footstep echoed like a warning, and every stair carried a trace of fear. Under the blazing Sonoran sun, the walls shimmered with heat, and the constant hum of cicadas mixed with the metallic hiss of automated doors. It was the kind of place where hope died before sunrise. Inside, time didn't pass. It rotted. The day started at 5 a.m. Sharp, with blaring sirens and guards shouting, "Arriba! Everybody up!" Prisoners rose in silence, knowing one wrong move could cost them more than breakfast. The coffee was watered down, the bread stale, and respect didn't exist. The routine never changed, only the danger did. Cell Block D, known as El Infierno Rojo, the Red Hell, was Ramiro El Toro Garcia's kingdom. He didn't need to throw a punch to rule. One look was enough. His body, covered in tattoos telling stories of wars, betrayals, and death, was a walking warning sign. No one went up against the bull and lived to tell about it. That stunt in the cafeteria, dumping rice over Miguel Cardenas's head, wasn't just an insult, it was a message to everyone. Around here I decide who breathes. But something about that moment slipped out of his control. Miguel's silence wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of a man who observes. And that still, unblinking stare began to bother Ramiro more than any threat ever could. Miguel was different. From day one, every movement was precise, every word calculated, every action restrained. He wasn't like the others. No calloused hands, no desperate eyes. His posture screamed discipline, his eyes constant awareness. No one knew where he came from, but rumors spread through Santa Rosalia's halls like wildfire. "I heard he was a sicario from the north," one inmate whispered. "Nah, man, that dude's military. I saw him take apart his mattress and hide something in the bed frame." "Whatever he is, he ain't just anyone," another muttered, glancing away. Veteran guard Sergeant Ramirez had seen it all, but even he took notice. "That guy's not normal," he said to a fellow guard during the afternoon round. "He never talks, never eats with anyone, but he knows exactly where the cameras can't see." The other guard laughed nervously. "You're paranoid, Ramirez." "Maybe. But if El Toro messed with him, he's gonna regret it." Miguel spent his days in silence, analyzing the guard's routes, shift changes, every sound, every shadow, every glance, logged in his mind like part of a plan no one else could see. At night, he lay still on his bunk, eyes open, listening to the prison breathe, the distant drip of a leaking pipe, the creak of a gate, the heavy boots echoing down the hall. It was as if the prison had a heartbeat, and Miguel was learning its rhythm. Across the yard, Ramiro Garcia felt his throne start to tremble. The looks had changed. Once, everyone feared him. Now, Miguel's silence had planted doubt. Ramiro's power wasn't just brute force, it was psychological. But all it took was one man who refused to flinch for that entire empire of fear to start cracking. His right-hand man, Esteban Cruz, tried to calm him down. "Boss, forget the new guy. He's nobody." Ramiro gave a dry, humorless grin. "No one looks me in the eye like that," and keeps breathing. As the sun dipped over the yard, painting the tall prison walls gold, Miguel sat alone in a corner, watching the horizon. The hot wind carried dust through the air, and the metallic smell of rust clung to everything. Other inmates kept their distance. There was something in his stillness that demanded both respect and fear. In that moment, he looked like part of the desert itself, motionless, silent, but deadly. No one realized Miguel wasn't enduring the hell of Santa Rosalia. He was studying it, and when the time was right, hell itself would turn against the man who ruled it. A distant siren wailed, cutting through the evening quiet. Ramiro lifted his head from the shadows and saw Miguel sitting calmly, face bathed in the red glow of sunset. For one brief moment, their eyes met, and everyone nearby felt the air shift. The desert was waking up. The next few days inside Santa Rosalia were like the silence before a storm. Nothing happened, but everyone knew something was about to. The veterans called it the devil's breath. Even the wind seemed scared to move. Ramiro El Toro Garcia pretended nothing had changed. He did his usual walk through the cafeteria, making sure everyone saw him, but the eyes that once looked away in fear now just avoided him. The laughter was gone. The respect had curdled into unease. A new kind of fear filled the air, the fear of the unknown, and that unknown had a name, Miguel Cardenas. The rookie hadn't reacted to the humiliation, hadn't sought revenge, hadn't said a single word since, but his silence, that heavy, unreadable silence, was eating through the prison like acid. Even the guards whispered about him. "Ramirez, you seen how they look at him now?" one asked. "Yeah," Ramirez muttered. "Nobody wants to provoke that guy. He's got ice in his soul." And no one dared get too close. It was as if Miguel carried an invisible field, something that pushed both cowards and killers away. Inside his cell, Miguel kept a rigid routine. Up before the sirens, push-ups on the cold floor, then stillness, eyes closed, deep breathing. It looked like meditation, but it wasn't peace he was after. It was precision. Every breath, every movement, every second had a purpose. While most men counted days, Miguel counted chances. Meanwhile, Ramiro burned. Each passing day, he felt control slipping further away. The men who once worshipped him, Esteban Cruz, Chaparro, Rojas, no longer followed with conviction. That crack in loyalty was enough to start an avalanche. During lunch, with the clatter of trays echoing across the hall, Ramiro stood. His eyes scanned the cafeteria until he found Miguel, sitting at the same spot as always. Last table, alone, eating slow. That calmness lit a fire in his chest. "Oye, Cardenas!" he barked. The concrete walls carried his voice across the room. The entire place froze. Spoons stopped midair. "You getting used to the menu, rookie?" he sneered, stomping closer. Miguel didn't answer. Only the hum of the AC and the faint rattle of a tray broke the silence. Ramiro stopped in front of him, breathing hard, waiting for a reaction. Nothing, not even a blink. Miguel just kept eating, same slow rhythm. That composure drove him insane. "Listen, rookie." Ramiro leaned in, voice low. "In here you either talk or you bleed." Miguel raised his eyes, sharp, steady, blade cold. "Then you talk too much," he said quietly. The words sliced through the room like a gunshot. Every inmate froze. Ramiro's jaw locked for a second. Then pride forced him back into the role of king. He slammed Miguel's tray to the floor. Before anyone could blink, Miguel stood, not in a fighting stance, just tall, still, unshaken. No anger, no fear. And that scared Ramiro more than any punch ever could. The guards started to move in, but Sergeant Ramirez lifted a hand. "Wait," he muttered. "Don't interfere." It was like watching a quake forming beneath the floor. No one wanted to move first. Ramiro stepped forward. Miguel didn't back down. The space between them was an invisible line of gunpowder waiting for a spark. Inmates circled around, holding their breath. Then Ramiro laughed, a rough, forced laugh. "All right, Cardenas. Enjoy your meal, but soon you'll be chewing on your own teeth." He turned and walked away, his boots echoing down the hall. But the silence he left behind was worse than any threat. Miguel crouched, picked up his tray and kept eating. Same calm pace, same expressionless face. Dozens of eyes followed him, caught between awe and fear. That man wasn't there to survive. He was there to wait. That night, dark clouds gathered over the Sonoran desert. Rain was rare, but when it came, it fell with fury. From the watchtower, Sergeant Ramirez watched lightning flash across the yard. Down below, Miguel sat in the dark, motionless, staring at nothing, patient, timeless, as if even time itself had joined his side. Ramirez whispered to himself, "If that man's got a purpose, God help us all." The hallway lights flickered. A generator coughed and failed. For a few seconds, the entire prison went dark. And in that breath of darkness, a sharp crack echoed from the west wing, the unmistakable sound of something breaking. The calm was over, and no one inside Santa Rosalia was ready for what was coming next. The rain from the night before had washed the dust off Santa Rosalia's walls, but not the filth that truly mattered. Behind the cameras, the bars, and the facade of a maximum security prison, that Mexican hellhole hid a system rotten to its core. Corruption, smuggling, torture disguised as punishment, it all thrived under the guards' blind eyes and the silence of the men in charge. It was an underground empire where every favor had a price, and every life a value. Sergeant Ramirez knew that better than anyone. After 20 years in the system, he'd learned that prison was like a city cut off from the world, with its own government, its own laws, its own ghosts. And Ramiro El Toro Garcia was its reigning lord. Or at least, he used to be. Down in cell block D, Ramiro's crew still tried to keep order through fear. Esteban Cruz, his right-hand man, was the collector, shaking down newcomers for protection, making sure nobody ate, slept, or even breathed without the boss's say-so. But since Miguel Cardenas arrived, things had changed. Some inmates started refusing the fees, others just walked away without a word. Ramiro's authority wasn't being smashed, it was melting, eaten alive by the quiet dread of what was coming. Meanwhile, up in the administrative wing, Colonel Hidalgo, the prison warden, lit his fifth cigarette of the morning and stared out the window. Something was off. "This Cardenas," he muttered, flipping through the file. "Who the hell signed off on him?" The report was thin. Double homicide. No details, no public record, no trial. But what really bothered him was the signature at the bottom, Federal Intelligence Department. Few knew it, but Santa Rosalia was also a dumping ground for the cases the government wanted to bury. Men who knew too much. Hidalgo took a drag and exhaled slowly. If this is what I think it is, he's not a prisoner. He's a bomb. While the upper brass tried to figure out who the hell Miguel really was, inside those walls, the balance kept crumbling. The place ran on a web of dirty deals. Guards sold information, drugs, food, even improvised weapons. In return, they got silence, and silence was the most expensive currency in that inferno. One night during the 2 a.m. round, Ramirez heard voices whispering from the cells. He crept closer and recognized them, Esteban Cruz and Chaparro. "El Toro wants him gone before inspection day," Esteban whispered, tense. "And if it goes south?" the other asked. "That guy, he doesn't even blink." "The order's clear. Tomorrow, yard time. Make it look like an accident." Ramirez stayed in the dark, heart pounding. He knew that stepping in could cost him his life, but something deep down told him Miguel wasn't the enemy. Next day, the Sonoran sun scorched the yard. Prisoners lined up for rec time. From afar, Ramirez watched Miguel walking alone as usual, under the same burning sky that cracked the dirt. Ramiro's men began to close in. Casual chatter hiding coordinated movement. Fake laughter, timed glances, synchronized steps. But Miguel sensed it, not with his eyes, but with instinct. His breathing slowed, his posture shifted. Every muscle fell into place like part of a silent equation. Time itself seemed to bend around him. Before the strike came, an alarm blared, short, sharp, enough to scatter the pack. Ramirez had pressed the tower's test switch. Officially, it was a routine malfunction. Unofficially, it saved a life. The circle broke. Miguel kept walking, untouched, like he'd predicted it all. From above, Ramirez watched the man disappear into the crowd. A chill ran through him, not fear, but respect. He knew then that man wasn't just dangerous. He was trained. Later, in the dim cell block, Esteban confronted Ramiro. "Boss, this isn't normal." "Shut up," El Toro snarled, slamming a fist into the wall. "People fear ghosts. I don't." But the echo of that punch lingered. And behind the rage, there was something he'd never admit: doubt. In the cafeteria, Miguel kept observing. Eyes, gestures, routines. Every fragment was another piece of a bigger plan. He wasn't after revenge. He was after justice, the kind the system had denied him. As the sun set over the desert, a long shadow stretched across the outer wall, tall, steady, like the silhouette of a man waiting for the right moment to strike. Santa Rosalia was about to change hands. The next morning, the sun rose heavy over the Sonoran desert, painting the prison walls in shades of fire. The yard shimmered with heat, but what boiled inside wasn't the temperature, it was tension. Everyone knew the day had come. Rumors spread like wildfire through the blocks. Ramiro El Toro Garcia was going to finish off the ghost of Cell Block D. The guards pretended not to know. The warden, Colonel Hidalgo, watched from his office, eyes fixed, as if witnessing something inevitable. Santa Rosalia lived for spectacle, and today everyone wanted to see who'd fall first. The yard was silent, thick as lead. Inmates formed a wide circle, curiosity hidden under fear. In the center, Miguel Cardenas walked slowly, hands clasped behind his back, eyes on the cracked ground, too calm for a man about to be hunted. Across from him stood Ramiro, flanked by Esteban Cruz, Rojas, and Chaparro. El Toro's stare burned with pure hate, the fury of a man watching his empire slip away. "Hoy se acaba tu silencio, Cardenas," he roared, arms wide like a performer on stage. Some laughed nervously, others backed away. Miguel just looked up. One glance, and half the crowd went dead quiet. His silence roared louder than any threat. "You talk too much, Garcia," Miguel said, calm, steady. "And you don't know where you are," the bull snarled. "Here, I'm in charge." Ramiro charged first, a punch fast, brutal, direct. But before it landed, Miguel shifted his shoulder, letting the blow pass clean through air. Ramiro stumbled forward, just enough for Miguel to push him with a precise, almost surgical move. The bull hit the ground hard. The yard froze. No one even understood what had just happened. The king of the prison was down, and Miguel stood over him, still as stone. Ramiro rose, roaring, swinging wild, fists, rage, chaos. Miguel didn't meet violence with violence, he flowed around it. Every strike slipped past him like water off glass. Then with one swift, silent motion, Miguel caught his arm, pivoted, and locked it. A sharp crack echoed. Ramiro dropped to his knees, arm twisted, pride shattered. Absolute silence, no screams, no words, just the desert wind whispering through the bars. Miguel leaned in, whispered something only Ramiro could hear, then let go. El Toro stayed kneeling, sweating, frozen in disbelief. His crew stepped back, afraid to breathe. No one dared help him. Guards rushed in, but there was no riot, no resistance. Miguel simply raised his hands and said quietly, "Ya terminó. It's over." He walked away, alone, back toward the shadows of Block D. In the control room, Colonel Hidalgo watched through the cameras, speechless. Those moves, that precision, that control, he'd seen it before, years ago in special operations training. He grabbed Miguel's file again, scanned the fine print. There it was. Former agent, Scorpio Unit, confidential case. Class A. Hidalgo leaned back, whispering, "Dear God, they sent him here to disappear." Elsewhere, Sergeant Ramirez watched Miguel being escorted back to his cell. But the guards didn't touch him, didn't need to. Even they seemed to know. That man wasn't a prisoner. He was exactly where he wanted to be. In the infirmary, Ramiro sat seething, arm dislocated, pride destroyed. Esteban Cruz stood beside him, tense and silent. "This isn't over," Ramiro growled. But Esteban hesitated, for the first time unsure. "Boss, maybe let it go." "Shut up," the bull barked. "I didn't fall." But everyone knew he had, not to the ground, but within himself. That night, the prison breathed differently. The halls felt wider, the air lighter, whispers spread through the blocks. "They say the new guy was military." No, government assassin. Or maybe some kind of avenging angel. Miguel sat in his cell, surrounded by darkness. Outside, Ramirez stood watching through the slit in the door. "You're not from here, are you?" he asked. Miguel stayed silent. "Then why'd you come to this place?" Miguel finally looked up, calm, steady. "Because sometimes," he said softly, "you have to walk into hell to settle heaven's debts." Ramirez swallowed hard. He knew he'd heard something he wasn't supposed to, and at that moment, he understood. Santa Rosalia had just welcomed a new kind of justice, cold, precise, unstoppable. El Toro's reign was over, but the story of Miguel Cardenas was only just beginning. The next morning at Santa Rosalia felt Strange. No yelling, no taunts, no fights echoing down the halls. The whole prison had woken up in mourning, not for the fall of a man, but for the end of a reign. The fight between Miguel Cardenas and Ramiro El Toro Garcia spread like wildfire. Inmates replayed every move, every glance, every second. They said Miguel moved like a ghost, that the air grew heavy, that even the wind stopped to watch. Others swore they'd seen the bull tremble before he fell. A legend was born, somewhere between fear and awe. The guard's footsteps sounded different now, not the march of authority, but of uncertainty. Sergeant Ramirez could feel the change in every shift. Half the staff thought Miguel was a dangerous killer. The other half feared something worse, a man beyond control. No one dared provoke him. Since the fight, even Colonel Hidalgo, the warden, avoided saying his name aloud. As for Ramiro, he hadn't left the infirmary. His arm was in a sling, his stare empty. The bull no longer roared. The men who once worshipped him now drifted away. Rats abandoning a sinking ship. Even Esteban Cruz, his most loyal man, kept his distance, pacing the yard alone. Fear had switched sides. The cell blocks themselves seemed to breathe easier. The constant insults and clatter were gone. For the first time in years, lunch passed without a single fight. It wasn't peace, but it was respect. Miguel, though, didn't seem interested in being anyone's leader. He kept his same quiet routine, up early, ate in silence, eyes always scanning. But there was something new in his gaze, weight, purpose. He wasn't looking to rule, he was trying to understand. And in every look the inmates gave him, he saw something he hadn't expected. Hope. Then something rare happened in the cafeteria. A young inmate nicknamed Chino walked up and quietly placed a piece of bread on Miguel's tray. No one ever gave anyone anything in that place. Miguel looked up, surprised. Chino kept his head down and muttered, "Gracias for what you did." Miguel said nothing, but his silence spoke enough. That single gesture changed the air in the room. It wasn't dominance, it was respect earned the hard way. From the watchtower, Sergeant Ramirez observed, torn between curiosity and unease. He'd served under powerful men before, but never seen anything like this. "I've never seen an inmate control a prison without saying a word," he said to a fellow guard. "That man didn't come here to serve time," the other replied. "He came to serve a mission." Up in his office, Colonel Hidalgo couldn't shake it either. He watched the security footage over and over, in silence. Miguel's movements were surgical, short steps, perfect balance, total control. That wasn't survival instinct. That was training, and not just any training, elite. He reopened the classified file. This time, he noticed what he'd missed before. Miguel's name appeared under a government project called Project Silencio, a black ops program that had never been made public. Men trained to vanish, infiltrate, and eliminate internal threats. But the last record stated Miguel Cardenas had died 6 years ago. Hidalgo lit another cigarette, muttering, "If this man's alive, someone high up has been lying." Night fell over the inmate wing, thick and quiet. The moon cast long shadows through the corridors. Miguel sat in his cell, motionless, eyes open, listening to the heartbeat of the prison. He could identify every footstep, every door, every whisper. It was as if the entire building breathed with him. During the midnight round, Ramirez stopped outside his cell. "You've got everyone's respect now," he said softly. "But what are you going to do with it?" Miguel didn't look up. "I didn't earn anything," he answered calmly. "I just reminded them, fear changes owners when someone's brave enough not to run." Ramirez nodded silently and moved on down the hall. He knew those words weren't philosophy. They were warning. By morning, a message came crackling over the security radios. Federal inspection, surprise visit. A delegation was en route. Guards scrambled, inmates whispered, and Miguel just looked up, took a slow breath, and closed his eyes. He already knew. The game wasn't over. The next move wouldn't happen in the yard. It would happen inside the system. The ghost of Santa Rosalia was about to become the nightmare of the people who'd put him there. The day of the federal inspection hit like a silent earthquake. Helicopters sliced through the Sonoran sky, black SUVs rolled through the gates, and a convoy of men in suits and dark shades filled the central corridor of Santa Rosalia Federal Penitentiary. For the guards, it was a nightmare. For the inmates, a spectacle. For Miguel Cardenas, it was a signal, proof that time was unfolding exactly as he'd planned. Since the day he dropped El Toro, nothing had been the same. Not for him, not for the prison. The fear that once ruled the blocks now had a new master. Inmates who used to fight over scraps now followed one unspoken rule: nobody touches Cardenas. But his authority wasn't born of violence, it was discipline. Miguel didn't need to shout. The air itself listened when he moved. That morning, as federal agents checked files and inspected cells, Miguel stood by his window watching the yard. He saw the lines of prisoners, the nervous guards, the tension vibrating like static in the air. This was what he'd been waiting for, the beginning of collapse. In the cafeteria, Sergeant Ramirez found him seated, calm as ever. "The feds want to see you," he said. Miguel looked up. "Me? They have questions about the incident with Garcia." A faint smile crossed his face. "So they finally want to ask what's really happening in the hell they built." The agents led him to an interrogation room. Small, white, suffocating, with a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. Across the table sat a tall man in a dark suit, carrying a leather folder and a stare that could cut glass. "Senor Cardenas," he began. "I'm Agent Valdez, Federal Intelligence Division." Miguel stayed silent. "You're not a regular inmate. We know who you were before you got here." Valdez opened the folder. Photos, reports, documents stamped classified. "Operation Scorpion, Project Silencio. Your name's on both." The air seemed to vanish for a moment. Miguel inhaled deeply. "The past died 6 years ago," he said quietly. "Not entirely," Valdez replied. "You were sent here for a reason. Now they want to know if you're still useful or just dangerous." Miguel lowered his gaze, silence stretching between them. Then with calm precision he said, "What's happening outside these walls is worse than anything in here, and you know it." Valdez watched him closely but said nothing. The meeting ended there, brief, heavy, unresolved. But as Miguel was escorted back to his cell, he caught something in Ramirez's eyes. Fear. Not the kind prisoners inspire. The kind a man feels when he realizes he's been serving the wrong side. Days passed and Santa Rosalia began to shift again. Forced labor stopped. Fights died down. Inmates started talking, sharing food, helping each other. Miguel had become the balance point in a place that had never known peace. Curiosity turned to respect. Respect turned to reverence. When someone got hurt, they called for him. Miguel was no longer the quiet new guy. He was El Silencio. Even the higher-ups noticed. Colonel Hidalgo, who'd once seen Cardenas as a threat, now saw him as something else, an asset. He called Ramirez to his office. "That man has more control over the inmates than my whole staff combined," Hidalgo said. Ramirez folded his arms. "And that makes you feel safe?" Hidalgo smirked. "For now, it does." But Miguel wasn't chasing power. He was chasing purpose. Every step he took inside that prison was calculated. He began mapping the system, transport routes, shift rotations, federal guard behavior. He memorized everything. He wasn't planning to escape. He was planning to expose the truth. That Santa Rosalia was never a prison. It was a human experiment in corruption. One night, in the hush of the corridor, Ramirez found him leaning on the bars, eyes fixed on the night sky. "Cardenas," he said quietly. "You could have finished Garcia for good. Why didn't you?" Miguel took his time before answering. "Because I didn't come here to destroy men, Sergeant. I came to destroy what turns them into monsters." Ramirez said nothing. The words echoed in his mind for days. He started watching Miguel differently. Maybe, he thought, this man wasn't a prisoner at all. Maybe he was on assignment. By the time the federal team left, Santa Rosalia had found a new equilibrium. Miguel Cardenas's name had already spread across the northern prisons of Mexico, whispered like a myth. The man who dethroned a king without spilling a drop of blood, the ghost who entered prison to free the living. And as the desert sun burned over the horizon, Miguel's eyes drifted past the watchtowers. He knew the waiting was almost over. The storm that began inside Santa Rosalia was about to break beyond its walls, and when it did, the world outside would learn that even silence has a voice. The desert dust had crept back over the walls of Santa Rosalia, but the prison was no longer the same. Something unseen had shifted, and everyone felt it. Power no longer lived in the guards' keys or in the fists of the most feared inmates. It lived in the quiet words never spoken, in the calm gestures, and in the steady eyes of Miguel Cardenas, the man who had turned fear into balance. The days became too predictable, and that was dangerous. For a man who understood the system from the inside, knowing the next move meant owning the game. Miguel had learned every rhythm, the step of each guard, the groan of each door, the seconds between alarms. The prison had become a clock, and he was the only one who could read the time. Outside the walls, Colonel Hidalgo was under pressure. Confidential reports, unannounced visits, calls from numbers he didn't recognize, all asking the same question: is Cardenas cooperating? But how can you cooperate with something you never asked for? Miguel wasn't seeking freedom. He was seeking justice, and the kind of justice he wanted didn't fit inside a courtroom. Inside the inmate block, Sergeant Ramirez started noticing strange signs, scraps of paper passed between cells, small notes exchanged by old-timers, quiet meetings in the yard during rec time, nothing violent but everything deliberate. Cardenas was building something, and he was doing it without saying a word. One night during patrol, Ramirez stopped by his cell and whispered, "I don't know what you're doing, but I know it's not about you." Miguel lifted his gaze. It never was. Ramirez exhaled, confused. "If you want out, I can help you." Miguel shook his head. "I'm exactly where I need to be." The guard fell silent. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was watching a prisoner. He felt like he was following one. In the shadows, the old king of Block D, Ramiro El Toro Garcia, was hatching his own plan. Humiliated, sidelined, now watched by his own men, he waited for the perfect moment to reclaim his throne. But fear had infected even his loyal circle. Esteban Cruz, once his most faithful soldier, now looked divided. Miguel saw it, and one afternoon, as they crossed paths in the yard, he spoke without looking at him. "There's still time to choose the right side." Esteban froze. "And what's the right side?" "The one that survives after the chaos." Those words stuck with him for days. He began watching Miguel quietly, and little by little, he realized Miguel wasn't building a gang. He was building something deeper, a network of order within the chaos. Violent men began changing in small ways, sharing food, avoiding fights, protecting the weak. And Miguel never said a word. From the tower, Ramirez recorded everything in his daily report. But what he wrote wasn't what he saw. It was what he understood. Inmate Cardenas is rebuilding something even the system couldn't sustain. Respect. He tucked the report away, unsent. He knew if the brass found out, they'd pull Miguel out, and the world might never see what he was about to do. One night, a blackout hit Block C. The lights flickered, alarms glitched. For a few seconds, the prison fell into complete darkness. During that blackout, 3 inmates were seen moving silently through the halls, carrying something small wrapped in cloth. Minutes later, power returned. No alerts, no reports. But inside Miguel's cell, there was now a sealed envelope. Inside, names. Men tied to Project Silencio, the very ones who had sent agents like him to disappear. The past was back, and Miguel finally knew who was pulling the strings. As the desert slept, Miguel sat in the dark, studying the list. Each name was a piece of a puzzle, each one a shadow waiting to be exposed. The plan had begun, right there, inside the prison the government thought would be his grave. By morning, Ramirez noticed something different. Miguel wasn't watching escape routes anymore. He was watching the cameras, as if he already knew what they'd record. "What are you going to do, Cardenas?" the sergeant asked. Miguel answered quietly, "I'm going to make Mexico see what you've all been hiding here." The words echoed through the hall like prophecy. Ramirez watched him step back into his cell, closing the door slowly. A beam of sunset light stretched across the wall, casting Miguel's shadow, long, unbreakable, unshaken. The shadow of a man who had found purpose in hell. Outside, as the sun sank behind Sonora's mountains, the wind picked up the desert dust. Crows circled above the towers. The desert was silent. But everyone knew that silence was the calm before a storm. The night began differently at Santa Rosalia. The desert wind howled, slamming sand against the steel gates, like hell itself was breathing outside. Inside, the clock read 3:17 a.m. when the watchtower lights flickered for the first time. No one knew it yet, but Miguel Cardenas's plan had just begun. In the control room, 2 guards chatted idly until one of the monitors froze, then another, then another. "What the hell's going on?" one asked, slapping the console. "System glitch," the other said, unaware that a virus had already taken over, a virus written years ago by the same man now sitting in Block D. As the cameras blinked out one by one, Sergeant Ramirez walked the corridor with a flashlight in hand. He could feel it. The air was wrong. He banged on Miguel's bars 3 times. "What did you do?" he hissed. Miguel opened his eyes, calm. "I just gave a voice to what was silent." Ramirez glanced up. Every red light from every camera was off. The system had been breached from the inside. Meanwhile, in the central office, Colonel Hidalgo woke to the blaring alarms. The screens flashed red, showing a single message: Project Silencio, files restored. The password was one he himself had helped create. Terror froze his blood. Dios, it can't be. In the cafeteria, the emergency lights flickered. Inmates stood, confused. Miguel walked among them, steady, holding a metal case, the same one he'd received mysteriously days before. Inside were the classified documents tying Santa Rosalia to the secret program that buried federal agents alive. Photos, reports, signed orders from generals and politicians, evidence that could burn the country to the ground. Ramirez followed him, torn between duty and conscience. "They'll kill you for this," he warned. Miguel didn't answer. He crossed the yard toward the administrative wing as sirens screamed. From every cell, eyes followed him, men who had lived in fear, now watching someone walk straight into the impossible. Hidalgo appeared on the upper walkway, shouting, "Stop that man, now!" But no one moved. Even the guards hesitated. The system itself had turned on its master. The monitors showed live feeds of files uploading out of the prison, straight to the press. One camera focused on Miguel's face as he walked the main corridor. For the first time, the entire nation was seeing what really happened inside Santa Rosalia. Hidalgo stormed down the stairs, gun in hand, eyes wild. "You don't understand what you're doing," he yelled. "They'll hunt you down to the ends of the earth." Miguel stopped a few feet away, calm as ever. "They've tried before." Ramirez rushed in, breathless. "Miguel, please, there's another way." "No, Sergeant," Miguel said softly, with a faint smile. Truth doesn't use doors, it breaks through walls. The colonel aimed the gun, but before he could fire, a sound filled the prison speakers, the hum of a live broadcast. Every screen in the cafeteria lit up, showing Miguel standing beside the files. He spoke slowly, voice steady, deliberate. For years, this prison has hidden what the government wanted erased. Men were sent on missions that never existed, and when they came back, they were buried alive in this place. Today, Santa Rosalia speaks, and the truth will not be silenced. The inmates roared, slamming their fists against the bars. The metallic thunder shook the whole prison. It was the sound of a system collapsing. Hidalgo ran to the control panel, trying to cut the feed. Too late. The data had already been transmitted to journalists, news outlets, encrypted servers around the world. There was no stopping it. When the broadcast ended, Miguel stood surrounded by armed guards. He raised his hands peacefully. Ramirez stepped forward, eyes glistening. "You knew this would kill you." Miguel nodded. "I died the day they made me forget who I was. Today, I just remembered." Hidalgo stood frozen as the radios crackled with breaking news. Helicopters thundered overhead, not to contain the riot, but to cover it up. Too late. The world already knew the name Miguel Cardenas, the man who turned hell itself into a witness. Ramirez lowered his weapon and stepped back. "What do we do now?" he asked. Miguel looked up at the light breaking over the walls. "Now," he said quietly, "we let the silence speak." The sirens stopped. The wind swept across the desert, carrying the dust over the towers. And for the first time, Santa Rosalia seemed to breathe. It wasn't freedom, but it was justice. Justice born in the most feared prison in Mexico. And from that moment on, it would change the country forever. The news spread faster than any digital virus. Within hours, the files from Santa Rosalia were on every front page across Mexico and beyond. Project Silencio exposed. Government hid disappearances inside federal prisons. The inmate who made the system tremble. The face of Miguel Cardenas filled news broadcasts, social feeds, and international headlines. Some called him a hero, others a terrorist. But everyone agreed on one thing. He had revealed the unthinkable. Santa Rosalia Federal Penitentiary was locked down by federal forces. The orders were a mess. Contain the chaos, secure the evidence, capture Cardenas. But when they finally stormed Block D, he was gone. No broken doors, no open cell, no explanation. Sergeant Ramirez was the last to see him. He claimed that during the confusion after the broadcast, the lights flickered for a few seconds. When they came back on, the cell was empty, and a gust of desert wind was blowing through an old rusted vent in the ceiling. Search teams scoured the compound. Helicopters combed miles of the Sonoran desert, but found nothing, only footprints that vanished into the sand. Colonel Hidalgo was stripped of his command. Investigations uncovered years of corruption, torture, and human experimentation disguised as punishment. Some officials fled the country, others were arrested. But everyone knew the fall had started that day, with one man and a metal briefcase. Ramirez resigned soon after. Before leaving, he wrote one final report, unsigned, sealed in a plain envelope. "I've never seen anyone so free inside a prison. His silence was worth more than 1,000 speeches. Maybe justice doesn't come from the courts. Maybe it comes from those brave enough to face it from within." Months later, in the mountains of Chihuahua, a small film crew was documenting a remote village. Among the shadows, they spotted a man wearing a wide-brimmed hat and leaning on a wooden cane. No one recognized him until a villager said quietly, "They say he was a prisoner once, but now he heals the wounded. Doesn't talk much." The reporter asked, "What do they call him?" The man smiled and answered, "Round here, they call him El Silencio." The camera followed him as he walked toward the horizon, the sun sinking slowly behind the desert hills. The wind rose, stirring the dust, and for a heartbeat, you could almost hear the faint sound of chains breaking among the rocks. Santa Rosalia had become ruins, but the legend of Miguel Cardenas lived on, a reminder that even silence, when guided by truth, can bring empires down. They say the wind that crosses the Sonoran desert still carries a faint, almost human sound. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks. The old ones say it's just the echo of the past, but for those who survived the hell of Santa Rosalia, that sound has a name. They call it El Silencio, the man who broke chains without raising a weapon, the ghost who made the world hear what power tried to bury. And on the quietest nights in Mexico, the desert still whispers, La verdad, siempre encuentra su voz. The truth always finds its voice. If this story held you till the end, take a deep breath, because the silence of Miguel Cardenas speaks louder than 1,000 screams. Type in the comments, El Silencio still lives. And then show that you too believe truth never dies. Like the video, share it and subscribe, because here every story is more than fiction. It's a mirror of who we are when the world tries to silence us. More stories are coming, and in each one, another soul will face their own hell and find redemption.